You mentioned the confusion between the function scorecard and the individual scorecard. How do you reinforce that distinction when you're asking the leadership team and the CEO to start drafting their scorecards? How do you reinforce that?
The first sort of switch or point, if you will, that everybody runs into is, okay, so this is the CFO scorecard. No, that's the finance scorecard. The
Yeah.
fact that the person who is in that role has a title of CFO is secondary, right? What do we need? What do we mean? What is the mission of what we consider to be our finance function or our legal function or our marketing function? The mental switch of going to what is it that we need as an organization rather than what we have or what we are used to is the first big switch, because what we are doing here is organizational design, right? And
Yeah.
we generally come in because some change in the organization needs to happen. We are not there just to log down the way everything has been done so far. And this is a very powerful tool to see actually why is that in this person's wheelhouse, because that's not part of their function. Does it mean that they have two scorecards? Does it mean that there should be somebody else? Or does this accountability need to travel because it just ended up there for historical reasons? So I think that when you really start thinking about it like that, a lot gets revealed and a lot of cracks that could have been covered with duct tape of habit in the organization gets revealed like that and allow you to actually fix it at its core. Well, hello again, and welcome to Cardcast. We have a new episode here, and Jed Roberts and I are here to talk about one of the cards. So let's shuffle and see what comes up today. And it looks like functional scorecards came up. We just had that conversation, Jed. So is it the functional or function scorecard?
I think it can be both. I think we use a slightly different language here. I use the language function scorecards because I want to emphasize that the scorecard is for the function. And no doubt we'll talk more about that in a moment. But for me, the scorecard is all about the function. It's not about what the function does, the functional side of it, but it's just a language thing, and I don't think it's important which
Yeah.
which term you use.
I would blame the writer here and the fact that he's an ESL, right? Because I agree with you. It's not that the scorecard is functional, it's a scorecard of a function. So we're not talking about a function of a scorecard, but we're talking about a scorecard of a function. And that is the important distinction. And I'll probably in the next edition make that grammar correction in the title.
So this is something that often causes confusion, and I normally introduce function scorecards initially to the CEO in the first quarter. So after the kickoff, I sit down with the CEO and I explain and I coach them through what a function scorecard is, and then I set them the task of coming up with their own with some guidance. And over the first quarter, we iterate through about coming up with the CEO's scorecard. And the reason I do that is because by the first quarterly meeting, I want the CEO to be comfortable with their scorecard so they are able to show the rest of the leadership team that he or she has her scorecard. And it's now time for the leadership team to start thinking about what their scorecard should say for their functions. So it's about setting the example for the rest of the team. So when we come into the second quarter, they're able to start building theirs out. Now, I'll ask this question because I think I know the answer, Milan. What's the first problem or challenge or confusion people have about function scorecards?
They're trying to build a scorecard around the person and not around the function. I think that's a big piece. But you know what? I actually do want to react to what you said, because while what you are saying is start with the CEO and then cascade down, I sometimes find it very, very difficult, because especially when you have a founder CEO who's used to doing absolutely everything, it's really, really hard without the involvement of the leadership team to zero down on what is it they actually should be doing. So I quite often start in those situations with the leadership team scorecards because the leaders get it very, very quickly. It's clear because they have a functional accountability. You can start building the scorecard from a functional accountability chart, right? Because once you put a mission in there, that becomes the mission on the scorecard, and it starts sort of building itself out. And then you can come back and say, okay, what do these leaders need from the CEO? Because sometimes you need to give the CEO a permission not to worry about something anymore,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right? Because somebody else has it, right?
yeah. No,
Uh,
I think we're saying the same thing in a slightly different way, and I use that first quarter as a way of showing the CEO that he's actually doing other people's jobs. So
that's
the
right. Yeah,
question is, no, that's marketing. No, that's sales. We're not talking about those scorecards yet. We'll do those next quarter. What is
I
your
see.
scorecard as the CEO? And often they do come back with three scorecards. They've maybe got CEO scorecard, and they've maybe got sales scorecard, and they've maybe got finance scorecard, depending on how many hats they're wearing. But the
Yeah.
important thing is we want to get the CEO scorecard locked down. And by forcing that distinction, like you're actually doing two other people's jobs, that might mean you're going to end up with three scorecards for now. But right now, let's focus on the CEO's scorecard.
I've done several times with what I consider success that I would kick the CEO out of the room and I would have the leadership team build a scorecard for them. It's very, very revealing
I
every
love that.
single time.
I love that. That's a
Yeah,
really, really good idea. I might
yeah,
start using
it
that
works.
with your permission.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We're all about sharing here, aren't we?
Indeed, indeed, yeah. Mhm. So, so you mentioned the confusion between the function scorecard and the individual scorecard. So how do you reinforce that distinction when you're asking the leadership team and the CEO to start drafting their scorecards? How do you reinforce that?
The uh, first sort of switch or point, if you will, that everybody runs into is okay, so this is the CFO scorecard. No, that's the finance scorecard. The
Yeah,
fact that the person who is in that role has a title of CFO is secondary, right? What do we need? What do we mean? What is the mission of what we consider to be our finance function or our legal function or our marketing function? So the mental switch of going to what is it that we need as an organization rather than what we have or what we are used to is the first big switch, because what we are doing here is organizational design, right? And
yeah.
we generally come in because some change in the organization needs to happen. We're not there just to log down the way everything has been done so far. And this is a very powerful tool to see actually why is that in this person's wheelhouse? Because that's not part of their function. Does it mean that they have two scorecards? Does it mean that there should be somebody else? Or does this accountability need to travel because it just ended up there for historical reasons? So I think that when you really start thinking about it like that, uh, again, a lot gets revealed and a lot of cracks that could have been covered with duct tape of habit in the organization gets rebuilt like that and allow you to actually fix it at its core.
Yeah, I've got a recent example of that. I'm working with a company that are growing very, very fast. And they've had a leadership team that's been in place for quite some time, but the roles have evolved over time as well. And they've realized that they need to bring in someone who is going to head up operations, who is probably a more experienced person than the person who is in that role at the moment. And that person's okay with that. They know that they're not able to take that function forward in the way that it needs to as they grow. And the conversation I'm having with the CEO is, he's stuck between, well, we can't actually decide, what the job actually involves, because, is it one person or is it two people? And I said, okay, well, let's take a step back. Now, why don't we actually build out two scorecards? Because, there's two groups of functional activities, functional accountabilities that area of the business, whether it's one area, it's two areas, three areas, that area needs to do. So let's build out scorecards for those individual areas. And then let's work out who is best suited to take those on. Now, it may end up being one individual, in which case they have got two functions. And over time, those functions might get combined into one. That's okay. But let's start off by building out the specification of what, however many functions in that area are, what those actual specifications are. And he said, yeah, but I don't necessarily want to go out and hire three people. I said, well, you don't necessarily have to, but just define the activities, the accountabilities that those functions need to cover, and then we'll work out if we can find one person that can do that, or whether it needs to be two people. Is it a head of operations and a head of logistics? Or is it a head of operations and logistics? Because the individual that you find is able to take on both functions. But let's not presuppose that right now. Let's get the specification down so you know what you need to look for, whether it's one person, two people, or three people.
Yeah, you're right, because the scorecards and the bodies don't necessarily match one-to-one. It's actually many-to-many relationship, right? Because you can have one person holding multiple scorecards,
Yep.
and you can have a whole bunch of people sharing the same scorecard, right? Especially frontline, like, if I am a delivery driver, my scorecard is probably the same as the other delivery drivers,
Yeah.
right? To a large degree, I might have a different priority, or I might have different details. But as far as the accountabilities and the competencies required, and of course the values and all of those other parts, that's going to be the same. But what is important is using the scorecard first and foremost as a tool for organizational design to really quantify and qualify the accountabilities that somebody in the organization needs to take care of, so the organization can move forward towards its goals. How we then distribute it between scorecards and between people is secondary.
Absolutely. So the next challenge I come across with scorecards, with capturing scorecards or documenting scorecards, is leadership team members often come to me and say, well, I don't know what to put in my scorecard. And that astonishes me. And I say, well, what are the 3 to 5 things that your function needs to achieve?
Oh, why are you here? What is it that this company is paying you to do?
Indeed. And you've got to be careful about how you phrase that, because it can very easily come across as like, no, really? You don't know what you do? And that's effectively what they're saying. They're saying, well, I can't write it down. I said, well, okay, well, go and ask someone else. Go and ask someone else to list down the 3 to 5 things that your function does. Okay, so they go away and they write it down, and they say, okay, well, now how do we measure whether those things have been successfully achieved? Okay, so I can bring my metrics in. Yeah, absolutely. But well, I've only got 3 metrics. Well, that's okay. You might come up with some other ones later on, but for now, let's put those in. So we've now got the 3 to 5 accountabilities, and we've got some metrics, and then we look at what are the competencies that function, the person that takes that function on, the individual now, what are the competencies that they need to have to be able to successfully fulfill that functional role. Now, and at that point, you've pretty much got a complete scorecard. Now you got as long as you know what the one sentence or the one paragraph mission is, what are the accountabilities, what are the competencies, how do you measure it, maybe what the priorities they have this quarter are gonna be or are, and then core values. Well, everyone shares the same core values. You've got your scorecard.
Absolutely. First version thereof. I think that is a thing that also gets overlooked, that the scorecard is a living document. You don't get it right the first time ever, right? So good enough is good enough at this point. Like, is it something we can deal with? Is it something that we can live with? And then we have our review process. And I know that's under the card, but we have to mention it here, is that the scorecard is a critical component of your quarterly review process. And within that process, you're not just reviewing the person. That's why we don't call it performance review
Yes.
or a team review.
Mhm.
We're calling it a review because you're also reviewing the scorecard.
Yeah.
Like, is it still valid? Does it still fit? Is it still the right one? Do we need to make any changes?
Yeah.
Right? That is a really, really important piece of that. So the scorecard will live and will evolve, and that is okay.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I gave a big thumbs up because that's really, really important. The review that hangs off the scorecard is not a performance review. It's a coaching review. It's a two-way conversation. But as you say,
I like to call it I call it three-way because it's between the manager, the leader, between the person holding the function, and the scorecard itself.
okay,
So it's a three-way conversation.
okay, I like that.
Right.
I like that. But it's measurable because we have the scorecard.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. As you say, the reviews are a separate card and a separate episode or a separate edition. So we'll pick that up some other time. But as closing notes around scorecards, Milan, what else would you throw in?
I think that the one thing that I see is how do scorecards fit into the policies of the organization. So several of my clients, and I actually really encourage that, have the scorecard as an addendum to the employee contract.
Okay.
And when the scorecard changes, they actually sign the new version, right? Because then you have the track record. This is how you're doing, and there is just so much information in that, and how that goes. I really like that. I think that one of my clients just brought it up one on their own. I was like, my goodness, this makes a lot of sense, and I started using that. So I would highly, highly recommend that because, again, it's hard to set up the expectations of the job clearer than that. Job description that's built on top of the scorecard or with the installation of the scorecard, that's a marketing material. Its job is to attract candidates that might take care of that. But a scorecard is the core of it, is what defines the expectations, and that's what you measure yourself against.
Yeah. So you're setting down the expectations or the outcomes the function needs to achieve, not the activities. And then the job description flows on from that. So scorecard first, job description afterwards. And one scorecard may actually have several different job descriptions because you might need to break it down, or the other way around too. Now, one job description could cover several scorecards.
And I really, really want to double click on something you just said because I don't think that it's said very clearly. Accountability, you're not accountable to do something, you're accountable to achieve something.
Yes.
Right? So it has to be outcome driven. That's it.
Yep. So scorecards, we like to get them in place within the first 2 quarters of an engagement. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but once you have clarity that scorecards bring your organization, everything just becomes a lot simpler, a lot smoother.
I'm actually a bit more aggressive. I'm really trying to get them in quickly because they help with so much. But yes, the prescriptive thing is 2 quarters is probably a reasonable expectations.
Okay, so if you don't have scorecards in your organization, now is the time to put them in place.